or a couple of them. A couple of questions are mandatory to show that you can argue and you're healthy enough to listen to the other party. And then we have another bell which goes at 3 minutes, I'm sorry. So it's a 2 minutes protected time, unprotected time. And then within that last 1 minute, again, you cannot be asking questions because the person has to wind up the speech and conclude whatever the person's saying. Right, we've also, so the question that the people take is a point of information, and when one member of the House takes the seat, they are allowed to, or they're asked if they have a point of order, which is they are encouraged to raise anything which is unparliamentary. It could be unparliamentary language, slang, code of conduct, any body language which is unacceptable in the parliamentary house in our country or any other country which follows the similar system. Happy watching. Cheers. All right.
Hello. A warm good evening to the August House, respected adjudicators, respected opposition and proposition members. I am the Prime Minister, and the topic tabled for today's debate is that the House believes that the West will eat the African pie. Now, coming on first of all to the definition part, by West, we would like to define the West as developed Western economies and state-funded, state-controlled corporations. I repeat, developed Western economies and state-funded, state-controlled corporations. By the term eat, we mean consume, plunder, exploit. By the term African pie, we mean African natural and human resources. So basically the topic, encapsulating it into one line, we are discussing that systematic exploitative regime of these West will plunder the wealth of African continent. Now coming on to the status quo, currently it is an established fact that Africa is an extremely resource-rich country, and but it has the poorest of economies. There is high inflow of funds from the Western countries, developed organizations for the relief purposes. But as a result of that, the Western economies are directly and indirectly controlling all the major natural and human resources. There is unbalanced and unsustainable growth pattern which exists due to Western intervention. There is concentration of wealth, rich getting richer, poor getting poorer, and the middle class is almost in existence in the continent. The bureaucrats and the people in the power in the government sell out the African resources in exchange of bribe, and to these entities like British Petroleum and Chevron energy giant, and in turn the benefits that they are receiving get restricted to the middlemen only and are not do not reach the people for whom the funds are targeted. There is calculated intervention in the internal conflicts of Africa in furtherance of Western powers' hidden agendas. In turn, what is happening is that such a resource-rich continent of Africa is depicted as a poor one by conventional developmental statistics, and so as to justify foreign aid. This in turn has resulted in a culture of dependency where people lose confidence and feel that they are dependent on another person for their own existence. We have basically 6 contentions. I'll flag them out quickly. First one is a political, under which we will cover effect on administration, which causing political weakness, lack of accountability, debt relief investment provided by Western countries without the proper administrative structure, causing anarchy. Thirdly, neo-imperialism in Africa by means of corporate intervention, using NGOs as a wheel to fund rebel forces to hegemonize the government system. Secondly, environment, destruction of natural habitat. Thirdly, society and crime, drug addiction and trafficking. Fourthly, development, which will include sustainable development and employment creation. Fifthly, human rights, prevention of violation of the human rights. And sixth, bringing benefits to the people of Africa. In the end, I'd like to conclude and say an unstable and destructive Africa means a stable and prosperous West. Thank you.
Chairman of the House, Chairman as the Prime Minister, and you're not supposed to say that, you have to say the leader of the proposition. That's how we refer the British Parliament to be included. Thank you.
A very good evening to this august House, members of the proposition and the advocators. I am the leader of the opposition, opposing the motion proudly that the House believes the West will eat the African pie. We accept the definition provided by the leader of the proposition, and we have perspectives relating to a blame game, trade plus cost-benefit analysis, economical perspective, politico-philosophical perspective, a political perspective, a military perspective, and societal perspective including health, standard of living, and culture and education. I'll start by rebutting the basic premise of the leader of the opposition, which can be summarized as high inflow of money, poor countries, control of major resources by the capitalist giants, rich getting richer, polarization of wealth, sale of wealth by selling resources, NGO funding rebels, and new colonization. This is where I provide my constructive of trade and the cost-benefit analysis, which shall act as a rebuttal. I say, we believe, and this is actually an objective reality, that in today's day, where mainstream trade in globalized world is coming together, there is a systematic increase in coming together of nations, irrespective of their being rich or poor. And when you have a system like that functioning, then the actual need to consume, plunder and exploit is not there, because the Western developed countries have already seen that this approach is not functional. As are the examples of Afghanistan and Iraq, they don't function. Rather than that, they enter into free trade agreements with these countries, get them up, enter into a system of joint collaboration for a holistic approach of growth that provides the African continent getting out of their apparent underdeveloped, the developing status, and provides them with an arena to reach the world economy. Yes, take it, sir.
Example of joint collaboration with Africa.
Is that your question? Well, my perspective here is that even if we don't have joint collaborations of private companies, we have state-owned corporations wherein usufruct of lease rights are sold out to private corporations or state corporations run by the Western developed economies, which provide Africa with a much-needed push. So we want a holistic growth which reduces the need to go for exploitation or plunder. Get them on board, have trade. The next perspective is the politico-philosophical perspective. Aristotle said that if the less capable are not able to govern themselves, then it is a necessity that the more advanced help them. Hence, if the proposition says that any interventionist approach tantamounts to eating the African pie, we say it's not so. Because when both of them come together for mutual benefit, they provide a holistic area of development, reducing any and all need to plunder, consume or exploit, because frankly it's too costly. The amount the developed nations would spend in doing these acts is far more than the free trade agreements entering between countries and providing a holistic development. You say you had a POI?
Sir, what do you mean by, give me an example of a joint collaboration between the government of USA and your country, your Western economic activity?
I'll provide you with a short example. When the rights of drilling rights of the nations of Egypt and Sudan were sold out to Shell and Aramco. Aramco and Shell were the two companies that got them. The progress rate started generated employment, had togetherness. You didn't need to enter military zone, or you didn't have to neo-colonize anything. Instead, you got them on board, you earned their trust, and you had an arena of holistic development. For this, I'm proud to oppose.
Point of information now.
It's mandatory for him to take two. He's taken a couple of them, I believe. That's good enough. Anything else? Point of order here. We welcome the Deputy Proposition Leader.
With the prime permission of the honorable jury. Much obliged. A very good evening to the August House. The Deputy Leader of the Proposition would like to start his speech. This debate would essentially boil down to 3 questions. The first question would be, what does Africa require? The second would be, whom does Africa need the help from? The third, what sort of help does Africa require? Now the answers to these questions would be explained in my constructives. My constructives are 6 in number. The first being the political and the effect on administration due to the entrance or the influence of Western powers in Africa. The second one being the increase in crime and the societal impact of the Western intervention in Africa. Now the third point would be, what are the effects on the environment by the intervention of Western powers in Africa. The penultimate one would be the economy, the effect on the economy after the intervention of Western powers in Africa. The last being introducing certain solutions rather than blindly approaching or blindly taking funding from the West. Those solutions would form the core of our arguments. Yes, sir.
Sir, you have said that there is economic reduction of the development in the African countries. What do you say about the Zain?
Sir, I haven't explained it yet.
No.
Let me explain. I'll come to it. Let me explain. So the first point being the effect on the administration. The first point the first point of administration being the Western intervention has caused political weakness. How? The Western powers has come into the continent of Africa. They started hegemonizing the government. How? They started they started to give out large amount of funds for acquiring governmental contracts. But does the lower strata of society get benefit from this? No. Essentially the funds which are given by the corporations goes to serve the private interests. Probably the likes of the leaders like Idi Amin, the warlords, the kind of leaders which exist in Somalia, Libya, and such other countries. I would like to quote 2 examples here, as my worthy leader of opposition has already quoted one example of Shell company acquiring the contracts for oil drilling. I would like to point out that BP, that is British Petroleum, has acquired a contract in Libya and in Mali, and they hegemonize the government and they try to bring down the government by funding the rebel forces so as to acquire the oil contracts. What happened was there was this government who denied them the contract, and they tried to bring down the government by hegemonizing the other party, that's the rebel forces. They started funding the rebel forces, and eventually they acquired the contract and brought down the government. So this is a wrong example set by the Western forces to the international community. Yes, sir.
If the Western businesses want to have business with the Western companies to have business with African nations, and they themselves choose to fall for these things, isn't their own fault and not consumption, plunder and exploitation by Western companies?
No, sir. I would like to differ. Here, what we are proposing here is, we love to bring investment in Africa for certain, but we would like to channelize this investment. We like to have it we would like to make it accountable. We like to make it transferable. How? We like to promote the organizations like African Union, who is here to force partnership of African nations. How? We can identify certain bona fide investors by having a common partnership of African nations, a common African currency, a common African constitution, by which we have a certain industrial investment agriculture policy. Here, by agricultural policy and industrial agriculture policy, we mean that a policy which we can identify bona fide investors. Now, coming again to the point of the administration, we have instances of other instances of neo-imperialism, where the debt relief and investment aid in return were given for structural reforms, but they were not resulted in such a way. Now, NGOs, as we already know, NGOs has been used as a shield to invest in Africa, but it in turn reflected the hegemonizing intent. Much obliged. Thank you.